From NBC News, this is Today with Lester Holt and Amy Robach. Live from Studio 1A in Rockefeller Plaza.
Now to a poignant story of love and courage. It's about Rich King and his wife Maggie, a man who honored his wedding vows for better and for worse to the very end and beyond.
We got married in 1970. Before we got married, she pulled me aside and she said, I want you to know something. My eyes aren't quite right. She said, I know there's something wrong with them. If you want to bail out of this marriage, you're welcome to, because it's going to be a different life. And I said, crazy, I love you. She had beautiful summer eyes. There was not a cynical bone in her body. There was not a dishonest bone in her body. And her eyes were happy most of the time. She had melanoma, and then she had breast cancer, and she had ovarian, which eventually killed her. But the worst thing was the diagnosis of Usher syndrome, which is a progressive disease of both the eyes and the ears. It robs your cells. It kills the cells in both functions. The prospect of going blind and deaf sent her into a horrible depression. She was suicidal. She was throwing things. She was very mean, nasty. It wasn't all that great. And sure enough, she came out of it, and that golden heart returned. It returned twofold. At times you say, God, I wish this was not the way it is. But you also get tremendous joy. I can say it's hard. I can say, yeah, it's difficult. But having said that, I'd do it all over again in a heartbeat. That caretaking became an extra part of the love. So I never considered leaving her for 1 minute. Her best friend, Arlana Faco, helped me. Without her, I don't think I would have made it through this whole thing. But 3 months before she died, she grabbed me and said, I want to thank you for a wonderful life. Since I wrote the book, I'm getting along pretty good. That love for Maggie is going to coexist whatever life I have now.
And we're joined out here in the studio by Rich King, the author of My Maggie. And Rich, good morning. Thanks for coming here and sharing the story with us.
Lester, thanks for having us.
You and I were just talking a moment ago. You know, those of us who are married took those wedding vows. You know, sickness and in health. You know, better or for worse. Right. I mean, it was put to the test.
Well, she gave me a great life. I said in the piece I gave her. She asked me about a great life. She was a wonderful woman, very energetic, very positive, not a cynical bone in her body. She inspired me, and she inspired everybody around her, and that's why I wrote the book.
But in reading this book, especially at the beginning, when you know the premise, that she's lost most of her hearing, her sight, 3 cancers, it keeps coming at you, and your initial thought is, life just isn't fair, and yet you both found a way not only to roll with it, but to almost, your bond became tighter.
Lester, she was the happiest person I ever knew. She, despite all the problems she had, she lived a happy life, and it's really a book about how to live book, only this is real. I saw her live a great life, a very happy life, despite all her problems. And I think that's what people are telling me about the book, and I hope that's the message I portray.
The Usher syndrome, very rare, robs the hearing and the sight. She had a very difficult time dealing with that, but how did she bounce back and find herself as this activist for the blind?
She reached 0. She was sick. At one point I thought she was going to die. She admitted thought she was going to die. She came out of that, Lester, by herself, and graduated from college, became a counselor for Letters for the Blind in Chicago, great organization, and she inspired other people who had the same problem.
I want to share a quote because, and this is a part of the book where she has just received an internship at the Helen Keller Center here in New York. She gets on a plane by herself, and up to this point we should note you had been her constant companion, not only as a husband, but also helping her. Let me read this. I was crying because I knew I had lost a big part of her as Maggie walked through that gate. It's true she had gained a degree of independence with a cane up to that point, but when she left on her own on such a big journey without me, I knew the so-called normal years of our lives were over. And I see normal, and I'm thinking, well, things weren't normal up to that point. But what did you mean?
Well, the cane freed her. She didn't have a cane. I was carrying her around, and when she got the cane and she came to New York on her own, you know how New York is the hustle and bustle, that freed her to do what she wanted. She gained confidence from that, got back to Chicago, walked all around Chicago after that, had a very, very fulfilled life. And
has become, we mentioned she became an advocate for the blind. Right. That was really the turning point in her life,
She became a counselor for the blind, a volunteer officer. She was therapeutic, Lester. Anytime they had a person diagnosed at the lighthouse with a problem, they sent them to Maggie, and Maggie helped them.
I find it interesting when the 3rd cancer came along, and it progressively went into stage 3, that in reading this book, the two of you never really talked about the fact that she was dying, yet you both knew it.
Well, it was unendurable to say it. We couldn't face it. I knew we couldn't. We talked about death all the time when she was healthy and had dinners together and everything. But it was unbearable. We both knew it, and we talked about it in vague terms. She says, thanks for a great life. I said, thank you for a great life. But we never quite could say goodbye. Well,
it's a story that really gets to the true meaning of love. And, Rich, we thank you so much for coming on and sharing her story. She was obviously an inspiration to you, and hopefully she'll be an inspiration to others.
And the charities will benefit from this, too.
And that's what I wanted to point out. It's important to note that 65% of the royalties in the book will go to the Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind and the American Cancer Society. To read an excerpt from My Maggie, you can log on to our website, todayshow.com. And Rich King, good to have you. Good to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
Be well. We'll take a break. We'll be back after these messages.